Hello, my friends. We are live once again with a special episode. This is Nick, also known as Social Summit, Sunday Foreign Policy Edition. We have my man, Max Blumenthal, editor at the Gray Zone, co-host Moderate Rebels. I appreciate you coming on the show, Max. We're going to have a fun conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm just tweeting the link out right now.
All right, let me fix the audio there. All right, cool. I appreciate you doing that. The primary focus on my show is covering state violence, the class war, and foreign policy through the lens of anti-imperialism. I work on improving and like becoming a better ally to our comrades fighting imperialism, like around the globe, right? Because it's hard when you grow up with a lot of like the imperialist propaganda that we grow up through. So I appreciate what you guys do because you guys wade through the imperialist propaganda that we are like bombarded with all the time. So you taught me a lot on foreign policy because it's like even when I was like even when I thought I was well informed, I still was misled in some directions, and I just got better as I became a leftist. So like knowledge is key in this kind of stuff. So I appreciate what you guys do, Max.
Well, it's a process for everyone, and especially if you grow up here in the US in the Western media environment, in our education system, you get a good liberal arts education. Sometimes the more educated you are in our system, like Curtis Mayfield said, educated fools in uneducated schools. The institutions make you think that you're enlightened, and you have to go through a process of deprogramming, which really means like reconstructing yourself in so many ways. And it was a process I've gone through where I thought I was right. I'm so sure I was right at certain points in my 30s, for example, and I made huge errors of judgment that I had to correct later on. But I feel like we're on the right track now, and I'm trying to help other people. And when people come into conflict with themselves, when they're told that the U.S. isn't advancing human rights, Israel's an apartheid state, that what we're doing, like what we're hearing about in Syria with the white helmets is they're not actually a human rights organization that's just simply trying to save people. All these things, they bring people into conflict with themselves and everything that they've been taught and their own identities. And they lash out at us in really hostile ways. So we deal with that. But I feel like being out there, and I haven't really been out there in a physical sense because of the pandemic like I had in the past, but like at a lot of public talks, I'll have young people come up to me and say, like, you really changed the way I think about everything with the work you're doing. So that's what really makes it worthwhile for us. And, I appreciate that intro and hearing what you say something similar.
Yeah, and you said they lash out, and that's something that I know is especially ever since I got on a platform, and I feel like a lot of people, especially the people who still play the red-blue partisan game, they tend to lash out at people because we ruin their political kayfabe, right? Where they have something where they tell themselves our blue team is good, Barack Obama is great, and then we bring up the fact that he's a war criminal. That they can't handle that, so a lot of people lash out. And that's what I noticed. And that's why a lot of people hate leftists. I'm like, we are the ones who want our government to be held accountable, but everyone hate us because we don't want to join their code.
Yeah, I remember in 2000, it was a stolen election. It was stolen more openly than the stolen elections that the United States condemns in Venezuela or wherever. It was stolen by the Supreme Court in broad daylight. It was stolen by Bush through his brother, through Catherine Harris. The Secretary of State of Florida was working for his brother. I mean, it's just so obvious. But I, at the time, and a lot of other people of my generation who really just thought if we get a Democrat in there, if we had gotten a Democrat in there, then the Iraq war wouldn't have happened and all of these horrible things wouldn't have happened. Initially blamed Ralph Nader. And, I remember kind of deprogramming myself from that, re-examining the election, thinking about what a terrible campaign Al Gore won, how the whole electoral system is set up to create these kinds of dynamics, and that Ralph Nader was right to throw his hat into the ring because there was simply no alternative. And, I was just in conflict with myself then. I remember I protested outside the Democratic convention in Los Angeles in 2000 got tear gassed. That was the first time I was ever tear gassed at a major protest. I was, the horses were trampling us. I couldn't bring myself to support that ticket with Al Gore and Joe Lieberman on it. I mean, disgusting. But at the same time, when Bush comes in and the trauma of the Iraq War and the post 9/11 security clampdown, the Islamophobia, the just straight up lying. I mean, Bush was absolutely the worst president that in the modern era. Then you say, oh, well, if only Nader hadn't run, we just have to hold our nose and vote Democrat so that never happens again. And then the Obama era takes place. And it's like all this hope gets built up. I was around The Nation magazine at the time, and it was like a religion. It was like the Church of Obama. And it was all these white liberals. It was these white liberals who would call anyone a racist if they challenged the dominant narrative.
Wow.
Chris Hayes was called people racist who didn't want to support Obama. It was insane. And I looked at Obama's record and I'm like, this guy is just another, like a Clinton Democrat, but he's smoother and he has the historicity because he'll make all these white people feel good about themselves.
Yeah, he's really good. President. He's really good at what he does. Like Barack Obama killed the anti-war movement.
And I saw it. I mean, I watched it with my own eyes, him kill the anti-war movement. They killed the progressive left, all that energy during the Bush era. And so after the Obama era, like the Trump thing didn't work on me. Like I wasn't blaming Jill Stein. Like I'd gone through that before and I felt really bad about psychologically blaming Nader when I saw what everyone was doing to Jill Stein with the added element of calling her a Russian agent. So that kind of was, in a nutshell, my process. And so people that the Democrat, what Aaron Mate calls Blumenthal.
I love that.
They hate us. They hate us more than they hate the right, and they blame us for Trump in so many ways, along with Julian Assange. And
they can't handle the mirror being held to their face. And what you explain, I love that, because this is why I tell people I never had Trump derangement syndrome. And I never understood that, because the implication of having Trump derangement syndrome is to imply that he's somehow worse than everyone else. And anyone who actually see what our oligarchs, what they do and who they support, they know that doesn't make sense at face value. For example, how can I have Trump derangement syndrome when Kamala Harris is friends with Benjamin Netanyahu?
Right.
So like Trump, we supposed to be outraged about Trump, but you actually friends with ethno-fascists, and that's okay?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to sum up the Trump presidency, it was just all he did was lift the mask on American empire. That's all he did. He just expressed what really was always there in the crude, realist way possible. He would say, do you want me to condemn Saddam Hussein? Well, we supported a lot of killers and we've killed a lot of people too. I mean, that was like the truest thing an American presidential candidate ever said. And then when he basically linked himself at the hip with Benjamin Netanyahu, with Sheldon Adelson, their shared donor, this like disgusting anti-Semitic stereotype sitting in the front row when they rolled out the plan to annex the West Bank. That was just American policy towards Israel in a cartoonish festival of Zionism. Whereas the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the way that they framed it, it was in terms of a peace process where they would just have endless negotiations while Israel continued to put new facts on the ground, new settlements on the ground. And Kamala Harris, there's so much to say about her and why she's vice president. Yeah. And I'm sure you'll have a lot to say, but she won less delegates than Tulsi Gabbard. She won no delegates. She ran the worst campaign for president. It was just basically people might as well have buried their money in the ground instead of giving it to her. But one thing she did was she was catering to the Israel lobby from day one, telling them, I'm going to do whatever the hell you want. And it's just disgusting because the liberals here in Washington worship Kamala Harris. Like I'm speaking to you from Washington. I grew up here. Across the street from the vice president's mansion after she was inaugurated and with Biden, no one really knows where he's in. He's kind of like in a semi-retirement home. Across the street, all these local people put up banners like, welcome home, Kamala, we love you. And then closer to here in this heavily gentrified area, which is near one of the poorest housing projects that's like surrounded with these gentrification, drone boxes for people who work for contractors, and all these new restaurants. There's a giant mural honoring Kamala Harris that's been woven together by women across America, and it says "I'm speaking," and it's this colorful mural in front of this new gallery of restaurants that opened up.
That makes me so sick,
and it makes you sick because you see her doing so many of the same things Trump was doing, but there's just a change of tone, and that's
and what does that say about the Washington disconnect?
Right, all they want is a change of tone.
Yeah, because you say that you show how they worship Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris had 1% black support when she dropped out in December. She was completely rejected by our community and by the American population as a whole, and for the most part, because she had to drop out before Iowa. Meanwhile, the Washington establishment loves her. So that says everything about how disconnected they are with the American people, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at her history and how she got where she was. She really started out in this Pacific Heights scene of wealthy white people in San Francisco, becoming kind of the it girl. There's a profile of her about how she just won over all these people in Pacific Heights, which is one of the wealthiest districts districts in the United States, highest earning per capita. And those are the people that supported her campaign for attorney general. She also, she had the relationship with Willie Brown, which was whatever.
Hey, she's a player in the game.
Yeah, she's a player in the game, right?
She's a player in the game,
definitely. And then as attorney general, what does she do? She boasts about locking up truants, black youth who they're not going to public school. So she locks up their parents.
Yeah, she was never going to recover with the black community with that. At this point, they trying to hope people forget about that. But that, people underestimate how much thought that black people can give in electoral politics in some situations. Because people actually wanted Kamala to do well, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that, when Kamala Harris launched her campaign, her name had a lot of Google searches on there. To me, that tells me there was a lot of people in the black community. They saw a light-skinned black woman who was a senator who was running for president, and they were like, "Oh, we want her because we want to know what she's about." They Googled her, they learned that she was a supporter of civil asset forfeiture, of truancy laws, and then they looked at her record like, "What the?" And then it went from her, they supported her, and then they dropped immediately once they learned who she was.
But you look at the difference between her and a Barack Obama or a Cory Booker. She didn't do like a PR stunt to try to ingratiate herself with the black community. She never really had that history, whereas Obama had Jeremiah Wright. And then when they went after him, and he went to Jeremiah Wright. And I mean, according to Obama's biographer, Jeffrey, I'll think of his name in a second. He actually kind of saw Michelle Obama as a way to gain respect within the black community when he had been in love with a white woman. I mean, I don't want to, that's the most controversial claim in this biography about Obama, but there's the Jeremiah Wright relationship. He goes into that church. Jeremiah Wright is a black liberation theology pastor in the tradition of James Cone. He is so righteous. So many people I knew in Chicago said he was the first church to come out and, after supporting the campaign against apartheid in South Africa, support their campaign against apartheid in Israel. And Obama became embarrassed by that those politics, the righteous politics, the prophetic politics of Jeremiah Wright. But through that controversy, it made people identify with Obama because they identified with Jeremiah Wright too. The Cory Booker, he comes from the suburbs. He comes from maybe a similar context as Kamala Harris, from a very well-to-do family. So what did he proceed to do when he wanted to become the guy in Newark who was, as Sharp James, his opponent, always said, a Trojan horse for corporate America? Cory Booker moved into the projects, and that was his way. And he'd always be rescuing a dog. I lived in Jersey for a few years, and I saw everyone would talk about how Cory Booker would always show up anytime there was a dog caught in a tree. It was like he was listening to a police scanner, and he would help rescue puppies. And then the fire department would show up, and the media would show up, and they'd be like, "Our mayor has rescued a dog in the hood," and that's
the most Cory Booker thing I ever heard in my life.
Exactly. And the reality
does not surprise me at all.
Exactly. I mean, look it up. I mean, you can look up Cory Booker rescues dog or something, but Cory Booker became, at least he had this story about trying to, And it was a story for the white donor class, because in Newark, you ask anyone on any corner, they hate Cory Booker because he destroyed their public school system on behalf of corporate America. That was his real job. He was working hand in glove with Chris Christie. They shared the same donors. Over 50% of Cory Booker's donors also donated to Republican Governor Chris Christie. And I actually got to confront Cory Booker once on a HuffPost Live broadcast back in like 2011. And I said, have you ever gone to Trenton to challenge Chris Christie for cutting the budget for Newark public schools, which he does again and again? And you could see the look in his eyes. It went from like rage, like pure rage, to I gotta like say a whole bunch of nonsense to get out of this. And so he was like, we need to move forward to the better future of tomorrow. You know how they always, like Obama, they talk.
The white liberal wine moms love that stuff.
Exactly.
They love it. Pete Buttigieg, like, they love him when he says they love like that's the formula. Those are the people that's Kamala Harris. That's the K-Hive.
Right.
I told people K-Hive was a bunch of white women cosplaying as black. And I'm not just saying that the numbers backed it up. I got an image. I show people this all the time where Kamala Harris only had 1% black support. Right. So it's like, who are those people you see that's rabid chaos supporters? A lot of those people was white women using blackface online. Yeah, there were articles that show they was boosted by trolls, by bots. This is who the liberal establishment appealing to. And they're open about that's their strategy now. They're going to abandon the grassroots and appeal more to the liberal white moms. And they love those platitudes. Like they can't get more than they can't get enough of that.
Yeah. Cory Booker was the master of it. We rise together, we rise. He always says that, and he's a Baptist preacher too. So he says. I actually was in Trader Joe's on Capitol Hill like a few months ago, and Cory Booker walked in, and this is like the Trader Joe's for wine moms, and like everyone in there was a wine mom or a wine dad. I don't know what you call the guy who's married to the wine mom, but that's who the guys were in there. And they were just like in awe, and everyone was taking a selfie with him. And he just went in there, like he had a basket with like nothing in it. He just went in there to bask in their love. And I was the only person, like he walked right by me and he looked at me like expecting me to be like, Cory. And I kind of gritted on him, but I just went in. I was like, I didn't feel like it that day, but that's just the sad reality of liberal America. And you experience it here in DC in a really intimate way. It really depresses me.
Partisan like electoral politics is the most depressing thing ever. Especially as I became more radicalized and starting recognizing the same pattern of bullshit of neoliberalism. For example, Barack Obama, one of the reasons why he was able to kill the anti-war movement, and the reason why he's like the Michael Jordan of neoliberals, because he was really good. Like you see him talk, and he was like captivate the crowd. He made people think that he want to do well. But then, like as I became more radicalized, I started seeing through this. I started seeing through everything. And one thing that was a real eye opener to me was the rise of Pete Buttigieg, because it was obvious that Pete Buttigieg learned from Barack Obama and his speech patterns. And then at first, everyone was laughing at Pete because everyone thought that they're like, oh, and I was saying this at first, like, oh, Pete Buttigieg, he just a Barack Obama ripoff. But I actually changed my mind because like Pete Buttigieg killed it. Like you guys, like he actually did a really good Obama impersonation. He learned from the best. Because I listened to Barack Obama now, like, yo, like for real, like go back, look, he sounds just like Pete Buttigieg. But now we used to the language now, and plus Pete wasn't as good as Obama. He's not as good as Obama, but I saw the script that he was using. Now go back and watch Obama; it's the same thing, and that's what everyone's trying to emulate. That's what Pete Buttigieg is trying to do. That Beto O'Rourke he tried to do that as well. I don't know what Kamala tried to do. She just fell.
And Beto, he does this thing with his hand that makes him look goofy. He can't control it.
You can tell he's being coached.
He's being coached to do that, to look charismatic, because he wouldn't move his hands before. Yeah, you can tell they're both being coached, and they sit them down. It's like an NFL linebacker, and they're watching tape, or like a boxer, and they watch tape of Obama and what works.
I don't know how it works on people, because to me it's obvious. Like whenever I see a politician does something like that, like whenever they do that, roll the sleeve up thing, I'm like, all right, that's rehearsed. Like to me, it's like super obvious.
Hey, what? No, I remember Howard Dean would always do that to try to look working class. He'd show up and he'd be like, I'm going to roll up and he'd do it during his speech. He'd roll up his sleeves. I mean, look at Howard Dean now. He's paid lobbyist for the MEK. of Iran, like a huge neocon, enemy of anything remotely left-wing in the Democrats. Where is Obama now? I mean, did he say anything about the collapse of the Trump ripping up the Iran deal, which was his signature foreign policy achievement? No, Obama's trying to basically seize land in the south side of Chicago for a library that will basically be a tribute to himself that the whole community is organizing against. So the community organizer is being opposed by the community organizers. And meanwhile, he's living in a mansion, which is really not, I mean, you look at the interior, it's pretty ugly. It's like, it's so like nouveau riche, but he lives on a mansion, basically literally on an island off the coast of Massachusetts. And then he's on like this, having like a splash fest with Richard Branson. I don't know if they're going to go to space together. Like apparently Branson couldn't even reach outer space, but that's where Obama's at. And where's Cory Booker? I mean, where are any of these people? What are they actually doing right now?
You know that Barack Obama, the only time he ever comes out hiding to sell a book or to punch left. That's when you see he doesn't come out hiding to whip votes to increase the minimum wage to get you more stimulus money. He comes out when he either want to stop a left wing movement or when he want to sell a book when he on tour. That's when you see him.
And I'm glad you brought up Buttigieg. I'd forgotten about all this. There should be a book really about what happened in the 2020 primary, because it was really Obama behind the curtain, and Buttigieg was Obama's Trojan horse. And they basically put all these characters in there to confuse people, make them think they had all these different choices. And then at the last second, they just pulled the rug out from Bernie, who thought he had a chance after Nevada. And they all just left and consolidated. Beto was another Obama Trojan horse. They all just left and got little favors from Obama and his donor base.
Yeah, and if anyone doesn't believe that, why would Pete drop out when he was doing better than Biden?
Exactly.
That doesn't make sense. So like if you say this and the average like shit lib mind be like, oh, this is a conspiracy. Like, was you paying attention? Do you see the shadow app thing?
It's a conspiracy. It just straight up was, and that's how our ruling class operates, through conspiracies.
And they was doing it right and open. Like there was a story that came out literally in the New York Times that said the Democratic Party is willing to risk permanent damage to stop Bernie Sanders. I'm like, bro, they are literally reporting this. Do you guys got like the memory of a goldfish or something? Like I was there. I was I was canvassing for Bernie. I literally seen everything happen. But like it's obvious they had their favorites, the people they want to push. Like for example, they wanted to get Kamala. They were trying to do Kamala, but that wasn't going to work. And you mentioned before, like the people that she surrounded herself around, it just nothing but incompetence. Like she was being promoted by the same people who was surrounded by Hillary Clinton when she lost in 2016. She was famously invited to the Hamptons and was recruited for her a long time ago. And I saw that. I'm like, okay, it's obvious she's the one they want. Like they report on these things. It's obvious to see that, right?
And it kind of, you know, they consolidated around Biden, who basically was Obama's, he's not octogenarian, but like somewhat senile hand puppet. I mean, it was basically Obama. All Biden had to do was win South Carolina after they consolidated around him. So then it goes to Clyburn and, you know, the face of the misleadership class. Mm-hmm. And a very conservative Democratic electorate.
I love that misleadership class because that's perfect.
That's Glenn Ford's phrase, I think.
They all fell up. They all incompetent. That's why they all fell up to get in their position. But go ahead, Max. I just like that. I like that phrase because I want to tell people they're not great, intelligent people. They're a product of nepotism, and they get in great schools because they know someone who knows someone, and then they follow the oligarchy world class. Like once again, Henry Kissinger was the mentor of Hillary Clinton. They learned the establishment tricks from the ruling class, but they're not inherently smart. That's why I like that you brought that up, because that's a message I tell people. I can talk to, like, if you bring in these Harvard motherfuckers up here, I promise you I can make them look like a clown on the issue of foreign policy. And I'm not educated like that. It's a code of thinking more than the fact that they're smart.
That's the most dangerous thing, is to actually be able to do that. And like you saw Jackson Hinkle's debate with Vosh Limbaugh.
Oh man, yeah, Vosh Limbaugh.
Like Jackson Hinkle, what is he, 21, 22?
Yeah.
Like he basically, he just had the right moral position. He comes into it from a basic anti-war progressive perspective, and then he takes it from there, studies the issue. He studies it in a much better way than than Vosh did, who is like getting coached by people who are just like absolute morons and just complete frauds. But the point is, you don't have to be some expert as to Johns Hopkins or any of these imperial training schools that are here in DC, George Washington, to understand what imperialism is about. And it's the greatest threat to this system is that we democratize foreign policy and people like me and you start actually going off the reservation and talking about it and explaining how it's very simple what the US is doing abroad. It's easy to understand. And of course, there are, you know, different layers of understanding you can reach, but that's the most dangerous thing, because no Americans vote on foreign policy. It's never really discussed. And when it is in the Democratic primary, for example, or Republican primary, they're basically, when they get to the foreign policy section, they are auditioning to be captain of empire. They're not speaking to voters. That's why what Tulsi Gabbard did, I mean, she's done so many things that I find like objectionable and like foolish, but what she did there on foreign policy was so dangerous. And I've never seen any Democrat do that in a primary. So definitely, by all means, like, you should continue to push that as hard as possible.
Yeah, and I actually convert a lot of people with foreign policy, believe it or not. And that's why I tell people, because people don't focus on foreign policy, they don't vote on foreign policy, but people who can pick up on anti-imperialist logic and understand the reason behind that. And there's the same playbook that imperialists use, the same talking points that neocons use, and that's why I'm like shocked at Vosh audience that they can't see through it. Like I'll watch Vosh speech for first after the debate. He was going around like, oh, if you believe this, you're a white supremacist, you're a neo-fascist if you don't believe CIA talking points. And I'm telling you guys, like, bro, if it was 2005, you'd be saying the same thing about weapons of mass destruction. Oh, you don't believe Saddam Hussein did that? Oh, you must have been some sort of white supremacist. Like this is the same playbook. How you guys not see through that? But it's all about education. You gotta learn to see past the neocon talking points. And it's easy to fall through that, especially if you have a cult of personality. You think someone's cool, you think he's smart, and then they repeat CIA talking points. It sounds rational, but you gotta think about these things. So I tell people, when you brought up how like people don't vote on foreign policy, and that's 100% true. But what a lot of people, and what I think they did this on purpose, to be honest, what liberal orthodoxy is, they like, you don't talk about foreign policy people because that bores people. I do not agree with that at all.
No.
Because as a black man and as someone who got a lot of people to dislike Barack Obama in my community, I'm telling you guys, one of the ways I did it was foreign policy. I told people that he bombed Doctors Without Borders. I told him he literally is a drone strike king, responsible for civilian death and expanding wars. And I'm like, yo, remember that George Bush did that? Like we're not supposed to like. And then people understand that like innately. They be like, wait, he did what? Oh yeah, you're right. So I actually use foreign policy all the time to connect to people and get them to acknowledge that our people in the ruling class are actually very bloodthirsty. They actually not the people that we need to be supporting.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, KRS-One had a song, "Build and Destroy," that was directed at Colin Powell, and it was about Colin Powell. I believe it was about Colin Powell. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. And I'm pulling up the lyrics now. But basically, he was calling him out for supporting. He was calling out Clarence Thomas. Yeah, he's calling Colin Powell's black, but Libya he'll attack. Libya is in Africa, but a black man will lead a black man to fight against his homeland. Okay, who finished the job there? It was Barack Obama, and there was no KRS-One to call that out. There was no resistance to it, but that was Obama. Really was a seminal figure also in the expansion of AFRICOM, U.S. empire in Africa. And this isn't discussed enough, but that's really like where you come in and you make those points and it clicks for people. And it's very,
for real.
I wonder why KRS-One strayed from all this, but there really are so few revolutionary voices right now who do political education. But he talked about, like, he's not an entertainer, he's an edutainer. He was a very effective political educator for people who couldn't afford Ivy League educations in his time. And there are very few people to fill those shoes, but it doesn't require a whole lot to make it click for people. And that's what Obama did. That's Obama's legacy. He he destroyed the leader. I mean, Gaddafi was the leader of the African Union. He was the one who was sort of the force behind it, and he was providing a lot of funding for it. He also funded revolutionary Black groups inside the United States. So I think like what we do on foreign policy is a mission for us, because we're filling the void that's been there in progressive media for the last decade through the Obama era. And it's something I noticed. I come out of that context. I was one of the like first kind of people in the blogosphere when that was a new term. There was no social media. I was in kind of the progressive democratic world at the time, but I also had a foot in the anti-war thing because it was the Bush era, and it was sort of mainstream to be anti-war and against the Iraq war. And so when I was writing for Salon.com, that was the first place I wrote for. It was like as influential in its day as NPR or the New York Times. Like all the kind of media elites read it. And I was mostly writing about the Christian right, but I did a piece breaking down the regime change plot in Haiti. It was a like half-year-long investigation I did basically just out of my room when I was living in Los Angeles, but I was talking to the people behind it. They agreed to talk to me because I was unknown. And I was doing all these investigations, and Salon was happy to publish them. Today, they would never get published in progressive media. Like even thinking about The Nation, like the amount of garbage they publish, they're pushing.
We got people that call them leftists. They call themselves leftists, but they're imperialists.
They're straight up liberal imperialists.
Someone asked me, they were like, "What's your definition of leftist?" I'm like, I'm being very generous here. You gotta be anti-capitalist, you gotta be anti-imperialist. That's to me the starting point. You got people that literally arguing using neocon talking points that call themselves a leftist, and people are convinced by that.
Yeah. I mean, their editors are just liberal imperialists who think that they're advancing human rights, or I don't know what it is. You can't.
A lot of them are Zionists. Like what?
I mean, Zionism is a different thing. I think in the world I'm talking about in progressive online media, and there isn't much progressive online media left anyway. Like Alternet collapsed, Truthdig collapsed. That was Bob Shear's place. You had a Chris Hedges column there. A few other places completely collapsed. And I started the Gray Zone just to kind of fill the void, but also because I knew that there were so many people out there that were hungry for real, just classic journalism, including like shoe leather journalism, where we go to the places where the US is trying to do regime change and just expose it like I used to do back in the Bush era. And you just see like in the Bush era, everyone protesting against the Iraq war, hundreds of thousands of people coming out. For so many of them, they were protesting Bush's Republican war. But then when you have, a Democrat in office like Biden right now, who's ramping up a war with China, who is entrenching US troops in Syria, who refuses to lift the sanctions on Cuba to go back to the level they were at under Obama when they were normalizing, who's going to break out of the Iran deal, is going to collapse, all of that stuff. Nobody cares. And, when Tucker Carlson gets spied on by the NSA, well, just because he's a xenophobe, then that's occasion for liberals to celebrate. The NSA is our friend now because it's in our hands.
The red blue gang turned people to authoritarians real quick. And they betray their values real quick. And that's why I warned people about this, and people got mad at me because I didn't want to fall in line behind Biden. I'm like, you had Barack Obama that killed the anti-war movement. Now you had Joe Biden who killed the immigration justice movement, because there was a lot of talk about like the ICE human rights violations, but now Biden in charge, he's expanding ICE. No one cares. This is this is why Democratic Party, you can't reform it. The Democratic Party is a party where movement goes to die. You get dragged to the right when you are a Democrat. So, like for example, AOC tweeted about Syria when Trump did it, but when Biden did it, no crickets. This is the problem. They go back to brunch, and actually it's worse because I remember before the election, I was like, I'm worried that liberals that pretend to care about Black Lives Matter, they're going to go back to brunch. It's actually worse than that. Because not only did they go to brunch, now they were defending the same policies that they were attacking under Trump. I seen liberals, well, technically, you got to follow the law. Like you guys was saying that when Trump was instituting the same policy on immigration, just for example. Like, so it's like you see these people who are immigration activists or they're anti-war activists only when Democrats in charge, and then when a Republican in charge, and then once a Democrat in charge, it's all good. It's all good. That's the problem.
Yeah, and AOC has kind of an Obama-like background in that she kind of came out of nowhere, more than Obama. Like I struggled to find information about what she had been doing before she was put forward by the DSA as this working class bartender who was just going to take on the establishment and abolish ICE. And I think it was Andre Damon at the World Socialist website. He put a lot of it together. And it was clear she was being cultivated by a lot of these NGOs that are around the Democratic Party, that are sponsored by, the big foundations like Open Society. There was something about her doing media training with Nomiki Konst back in 2017, which helps explain why Nomiki was defending her so hard during the Medicare for All thing. But she kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's clear like she wasn't watching Fred Hampton Leftists. Like she didn't have a whole lot of education on foreign policy, although maybe she had some anti-war instincts. You can tell that from her interview where she's asked about Israel-Palestine and she didn't know how to answer very well. So she doesn't feel confident taking on the foreign policy blob in DC. Ilhan Omar, like she has.
They should be looking for those fights. My thing is like, even if you are an advocate of inside game, my argument is the inside game is not working right. That's a problem. Because if you AOC, you should be looking forward to those fights. Like when I say we need to cut the military budget because if you are not serious about climate change, it's like what? Like, yeah, I want to talk about that issue. That's just, they should be open to challenge these things, but they always trying to shy away from those kind of stuff. But go ahead, continue, Max. I just want to add that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think she doesn't really know how to proceed there. And she's very ambitious. She's more ambitious than any of the other members of the squad.
You can see it.
And you can see it. She's in New York. I think she wants to be senator or something more than just.
I think Speaker of the House. That would be my guess.
Or that, like, when the power shifts, and I don't know, like she hangs on for like 20 years. Maybe that'll be possible.
Because one of the ways that Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House because she became known as a great fundraiser for Democrats. Then that story came out where AOC was like funding corporate Democrats and CIA Democrats. So I see her following that same path where she want to be like the leader in Congress. But that's just my guess. Like there's some people that say she may want to primary Chuck Schumer. But I don't think she's gonna do that. No. I think her path is more trying to follow the like Pelosi route because more sycophants get mad at me for saying this, but a lot of people don't remember Nancy Pelosi when she started out was supportive of universal health care. So I'm just trying to raise the flag before it get bad. Like we can't give these people benefit of the doubt. Let them prove us wrong. Like there's nothing wrong with like, damn, she did better than I expected. Instead of apologizing for her, that doesn't make sense. But what did you about to say, Max?
Well, I was just trying to, and I'm just like thinking on the fly, thinking about AOC. And what it means to be kind of someone who comes in to challenge the establishment into this system, into Congress. And what happened, you think about what happened to her. She became an international celebrity. Her life is so much different than it was before when she was sort of like a run-of-the-mill progressive activist who was doing media trainings with Nomiki Konst. Like she has the potential. If she left Congress, she would be instantly a millionaire, a multimillionaire. She's on the cover of magazines. She was one of Bernie's top proxies, surrogates. She was not very effective surrogate, but she was one of his top surrogates. And you have a choice. You can do that. They're making an example of her. Someone who plays nice, someone who is doing the right thing according to the establishment, one wing of the ruling class. And then you have the alternative. And I don't even think it's like, they're very different. There are many levels of this. The alternative is Tulsi Gabbard, who was basically had character assassinated in broad daylight by U.S. intelligence.
She was DNC vice chair at one point, wasn't she?
She was.
If I got it right, I think she was like, I want to make sure I'm correct on that, but I think she was like, so my point is she had like a really promising career within the Democratic Party.
Hugely. I mean, she checks all the boxes more than AOC. She was in Iraq. She actually saw real combat. She was decorated. She is, if she wanted to claim it, she could have said, unlike Elizabeth Warren, I'm the first indigenous candidate for president. She's Pacific Islander, very attractive and charismatic, good on TV. She was on Bernie for America's board. So she checks all the boxes, and she was destroyed for taking on the foreign policy establishment. And I think she could have gone much further, but she had that experience in the Anbar Triangle in Iraq, where she saw the rise of Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia and how U.S. occupation led to that, and how it spread into Syria and morphed into ISIS and destroyed a previously prosperous and multi-confessional pluralistic society. And she spoke about it on the national stage and went to Syria, and she was destroyed. And I saw the hand of U.S. intelligence in her destruction. And I think it's so important. I mean, because the show is called Fred Hampton Leftists. It's about someone who was assassinated by the deep state, by the national security state. I mean, it wasn't just the Chicago police. It was the Cook County DA. It was the FBI. And this is what happens. And I think it's frightening for a lot of people to actually, in Washington, when they think they come in and they want to take on the foreign policy establishment, really go after empire, they need to think about being assassinated in one way or another. And it's character assassination, just having your life turned into a living hell and being seeing yourself on TV as a Russian agent or whatever. That's what they will do to you. And it's no different than Operation Chaos or COINTELPRO. And you see them sort of doing it to Ilhan Omar, but it's only through the other wing right now and some of the pro-Israel Democrats.
Yeah, and AOC recognize that, and she don't want them to turn on her like they turn against Tulsi. And Tulsi, once again, I had a lot of issues with Tulsi, but I got a lot of criticisms of Bernie and AOC. But Tulsi did do a good job speaking on the issue of imperialism, despite I know she had some issues, but that's a good thing. Like the AOC has some issues and Bernie has some issues, but when Tulsi did speak on Julian Assange, you know what I mean, she did speak about, like, there's some differences between her that I give her credit over Bernie and AOC. But the thing with
backing away, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, the thing is with Tulsi, it seems like the smear job on her kind of broke her brain, where she started playing like this culture war nonsense stuff. Like I'll know, like almost like to get back at the Democrats. She's like, okay, I'm gonna join the Republicans to get back. Like, you don't. Why you do that way? You to get back at the Democrats, you should turn left. You could easily, all right, I'm gonna screw Hillary Clinton side of the Democrats. Let me prop up the left. But I feel like she's doing the exact opposite, where she kind of focused on her own brand, and the part of her brand is getting Republicans over. So she played like the culture war game. But that's my take on her. But she's not in the game no more. So I don't like. I'll focus on punching up and focus on people in power. She's not even. She retired from Congress, so it's like whatever. I think at the end of the day, I was like really disappointed how things like turned with her. But I think if you can't acknowledge there's some good in what she did and some bad, I think you're being unreasonable. That's how I feel, because I know some people, they're like, oh, screw Tulsi, but no, I think there's some positives and obviously some negatives as well. And like you mentioned with AOC, and she had a really hard job, but she did right, and I want to acknowledge that. Like, if AOC played the inside game the way I want her to play, the way I think it could be effective, AOC would have had the hardest job, because she would have been the most popular. The first one came in there and rebuking her party. She would have been hated. She would have been smeared by the establishment. She would have been, who knows, like character assassinations, probably death threats. Like, she had an unbelievably hard job, and she followed through the way we wanted her to. But that's the role that she had to play. But at human nature, like, all right, that makes sense. She saw that. And who knows what she was told behind the scenes, that too. And she was like, all right, I'm going to take it easy. And that's the reality. Yeah. I don't want to say it. Like, AOC people get mad at me, but I understand the humanity of that decision too. Because if AOC did what we wanted, have like a true revolutionary in Congress that back up like general strike, labor movement, calling out U.S. imperialism, she would have been hated by her party. They hate her now for doing the milquetoast bullshit she's doing now. Imagine what it would be like if she was actually leading a charge against Nancy Pelosi, actually voting against the HEROES Act and calling out the corporate corruption in that. Like, if she was tweeting nonstop about the Syria bombings, calling out U.S. crimes against Julian Assange every day. Like, if she did this stuff, she would have been hated. And it would have been a tough road for her to follow. But we would have had her back. But she didn't do that. And even if you're AOC fan, you can't deny that. Like, she took the path of least resistance. But go ahead, Max.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. So I don't really have much to add. I would just say they would go after one thing that, they haven't gone after is her partner. And they would do that. they would go after your family.
I heard stories where I believe anything at this point. Like I heard so many crazy stuff that they would do.
Well, you remember what Chuck Schumer said? It was like in an interview on Meet the Press. About Trump. He said, if you mess with U.S. intelligence, they got 100 ways to screw you. And he said it like happily, like, yeah. So that's partly what they exist for. And it is happening. They have done that to Tucker Carlson. Like
100%.
That's what's happening. It's so disgusting for me to see, progressive journalists make light of it and file phony FOIA requests or whatever to try to embarrass him. Like, yes, he's a xenophobe. Like, we get it. I don't agree with any of the shit he does about immigration, and that's it sickens us all. But this is about the NSA spying on media figures, and what they're trying to do is prevent any prominent figure from giving a voice to Vladimir Putin, because that's what leads to peace. That's what leads to peaceful understanding, is when you let the demonized leader speak to the American public on a popular platform and explain why some of these moves might have been rational, entering Syria, for example, annexing Crimea. So that's what's going on here, is happening right in front of our eyes. The same stuff we learned about 50 years ago is happening right before our eyes. On some level, it's happened to me as well. I can talk about that all day, but it's definitely, it hasn't reached the level. I mean, it hasn't reached the level of like what happened to Tulsi Gabbard, but I would really encourage everyone watching. I think what leftists don't learn about enough, who are interested in the role of the national security state in crushing dissent, is the assassination of JFK. There's a new Oliver Stone film coming out, which I feel like is one of Oliver's final statements. And it's about the assassination. And what Oliver and so many people believe is that JFK was assassinated because he opposed the Cold War. And in one of his, you can say all you want about JFK being a Cold Warrior and making a lot of moves he made a lot of concessions to the national security state, which was newly established. I mean, the CIA was kind of a novel institution in his time, and it wasn't clear that which course the U.S. was going to take. Him and his brother faced down the Joint Chiefs, who wanted to, and they actually recorded the meetings, they wanted to bomb Cuba with nuclear weapons during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and instead established a back channel to Khrushchev to tamp down on tensions. But watch JFK's, one of his final speeches at American University. It should be taught in, American elementary schools or junior high, but nobody talks about it. It's because he goes to AU to denounce the Cold War and this era of permanent hostility that the U.S. was entering with the Soviet Union and China as well. And a few weeks later, he has his head blown off. In fact, there were many assassination plots that were called off, or, they were found out by JFK's Secret Service. But this is one of the most threatening things any American president could have done. And he had his head blown off. And I think, history could have been slightly different. Of course, JFK's speech at AU includes condemnations of communism. He was an anti-communist. But now it seems like we're on a permanent course in this.
Yeah, the capitalists at the time was really smart, and they saved their game and they doomed us all, because I honestly believe if people like Fred Hampton wasn't killed, and MLK wasn't killed, and Malcolm X wasn't killed, we're looking at a completely different game. So totally. They're smart. They know what they're doing. They said, totally. Hell no, we can't let those people. they clamped down on the people they need to clamp down on. They killed the leftist leaders in South America that they needed to kill. They killed the black revolutionaries that they needed to kill. And the people who fell in line, the Jim Clyburns of the world, for example, those are the people who was rewarded. And the people who was actually true revolutionaries, they was killed. So to add to your point, if you have a lot of these other people that was allowed to live and thrive and continue to advocate and continue to grow their message, we will be in a completely different position right now. Completely different.
Yep. And you just have to go back to that era and imagine what it would be like to be in 1968 when it did seem possible across the West to actually have this change, and how it was destroyed on so many levels. I read an interview with Lenny Brenner, who is a somewhat obscure Trotskyist historian who has some really fascinating books about Zionism, but he was the treasurer for Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. And he talked about how when Stokely came out about Palestine and became like the internationalist, anti-imperialist that we know him to be, all of his funds dried up. And that was the end of SNCC.
Wow.
And who else came out of SNCC? Well, John Lewis, look at what became of him. He spent some of his last days complaining that a naval boat in his name was not being built fast enough. I mean, what would Martin Luther King have said about that? And we're supposed to just talk about him like he's this untouchable hero. He was doing paid talks with Goldman Sachs. He was constantly talking trash about Black Lives Matter during the Obama era. It was felt like they were just carting him around to prop up the establishment, condemning Bernie when saying Bernie never participated in the civil rights movement. And that's what I don't know if that's what we're left with, but that's what the establishment wants to kind of give us. And Kamala's kind of the next generation.
Yeah, actually, I found this because I remember we mentioned, we can switch gears here because we mentioned about how Kamala and reason why she was selected by the establishment. It was obvious because her loyalty to AIPAC and Israel. I shared this before, again, but I saw this as soon as I saw this speech and I saw stuff like this circulating around. I knew that Kamala was going to be chosen one. So they just show her mindset, and this is why she was chosen. It's a quick clip here.
In the midst of uncertainty and turmoil, America's support for Israel's security must be rock solid. And as Iran continues to launch ballistic missiles, while it arms and funds its terrorist proxy Hezbollah, we must stand with Israel. As Hamas maintains its control of Gaza and fires rockets across Israel's southern border,
now you see why she was chosen.
We must stand with Israel. And as ISIS and civil war in Syria destabilize the region, displacing millions and threatening shared security interests, we must support all those affected by ongoing violence and terror, and we must stand with Israel.
So that's about men there. You guys get the point there. But now you guys see why she was chosen. You guys see why when Bernie Sanders proposed just a basic 10% military budget increase, nothing. That's nothing. Yeah. Kamala Harris voted against it. So stuff like that, like, okay, so she knows her role in the system.
Someone commented her father must vomit in his mouth every time she speaks. Her father is a Jamaican Marxist historian, if I'm not wrong, sort of like Pete Buttigieg's father. So I don't know, maybe don't have children if you're a Marxist, but there was this one cheesy interview she did where she was like joking about smoking weed and like all. I don't know if you remember this.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and her father denounced her and said, like, this brings shame upon our family. And that's when Tulsi called her out too, and is like, you joked about smoking marijuana while you locked up so many Black youth.
That's why I love class traders, because there's a long legacy of people of children of leftists and Marxists who become massive disappointments. Pete Buttigieg as well, right?
Exactly. His father was the head of the Antonio Gramsci Society, and is a follower of Gramsci. But I mean, it's like it's basically like Alex P. Keaton. But yeah, her father was probably disgusted by her, and yeah, she's no fan of Tupac. She was talking about how she loved Tupac. Come on, what would Tupac think of this? What would he have to say about this?
Imagine what Fred Hampton was. Like, MLK was an anti-imperialist. Like, what do you guys think they would think of these people? It doesn't. That's why I wrote my first article was embrace MLK, reject Barack Obama, because we have an era of these Black capitalists and Black imperialists. And like for him to say, without education, you get Black capitalists, you get Black imperialists. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly who Kamala Harris is by promoting these the neoliberals idea. Like, we supposed to be anti-war. Like, that doesn't. I grew up during the George Bush administration. You wrote about this as well, and that's why I got my anti-imperialist point of view. And with this, actually, I kind of want to ask you about this as well, because this is why I've been warning people about the Democratic Party, because it was openly like running to Trump's right on foreign policy, and now when I see that Biden is pretty much his foreign policy is just like Trump, even now, I want to get your opinion on the Afghanistan withdrawal, because I don't know why do people keep calling it a withdrawal when they keep in private militia there. Like, isn't the whole point where we probably getting out? Like, they still invest in resources. They invested private militia there. And also, why I warn people about, like, if you pulling out Afghanistan, why are you increasing the military budget? Why are you guys still having more military bases? So I warn people, like, even if they reduce their funds, because I'm not calling it a pullout unless we completely out. Like, we still got private militias there. We're not all the way out. But if we do that, we're gonna redirect that, and they're gonna redirect that back to focus on stuff like fighting China and fighting against Russia. And that's what the Biden administration already said their plan is.
Well, think about who's next door to Afghanistan. Someone asked a question about, all these claims of Uyghur genocide, and this kind of relates.
I'd love to hear about that.
One of the reasons that China has enacted a counterinsurgency policy in the Xinjiang province, which is where much of the population is Uyghur, is because of the rise of a Wahhabi jihadist group, which grew out of the U.S. intervention, the CIA covert operation in Afghanistan during the 80s and the destabilization of Afghanistan in the 90s, called the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. It's allied with Al-Qaeda right now in Syria. They're like working in the Idlib province in Syria with Al-Qaeda. They're formally allied with it. But the Trump administration removed this group from its list of terror groups. The U.S. listed it as a terror group when it went into Afghanistan. The Trump administration removed it and said it doesn't exist. This group doesn't exist. But the reality is, according to a United Nations Security Council report issued last June, that the ETIM, which has thousands of members in Syria, has hundreds of members and numerous allies in Afghanistan right now on the Chinese border. I mean, not far from Xinjiang. So they can easily use Afghanistan as another, they turn back on the rat line and use it to destabilize China in this very mountainous region of Xinjiang, which is hard to secure. That's to the U.S.'s. So you can actually look at the destabilization of Afghanistan, which is inevitable. Look at the way the U.S. left Afghanistan. They're just like, well, we failed. Let's go. The destabilization of Afghanistan actually can benefit the U.S. new Cold War on China by turning up the heat with these jihadist groups. And I have a very strong suspicion the U.S. will start supporting them again if they haven't in the past. So that's some background there. And yes, it's not a withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's a lot like Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, exactly.
They said we're pulling our settlers out and we're not going to have troops there anymore. Well, this is 2021. You don't necessarily need troops on the ground to control an area.
I want to get your thoughts on this because, like, when I see them switch into a private militia, I think, do you hear Biden's speech when you're talking about Afghanistan? And when you watch the speech, I'm like, bro, you're making some great anti-imperialist points right now. So why doesn't that apply to other countries? Why does that apply to your rest of your foreign policy endeavors?
Exactly.
But even beyond that, like, even if you switch into a private militia, why do anyone think this is good? In fact, that leads to less accountability. And this is a way where your taxpayer dollars go to the military contractors. So it's taxpayer funding going right to the military, and there's no accountability. And I want to get your thoughts on this because I honestly believe this is a way to have less accountability, and it's a cover where they can get the private militias that can help the opium, heroin, morphine drug cartel that come out of Afghanistan. That's another thing I think about that. I don't know what your thoughts about that, but I think that's a big part of it because I think that's a giant part of the Afghanistan lie. And I have this here, and I saw this story. Obviously, this wasn't no one really talk about this stuff here, but this story lived in my head rent free ever since I saw this about 2 years ago. The U.S. lies and deception spelled out in the Afghanistan's papers. So if you guys don't know, the Afghanistan papers pretty much revealed that pretty much everyone involved over the last 3 administrations of the Afghanistan war was lying. They was incompetent. They didn't know how to win. They knew it pretty much was a hustle for military industrial complex. So whenever you see the fact that they admit they have no win condition, they didn't know what the hell was going on. How can anyone advocate for staying in Afghanistan? It doesn't make any sense. I think, once again, they brought put the private contractors in there, and they brought getting opium and heroin and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, what's your thoughts, Max? What's your thoughts on their pulling out? I've been telling people, don't fall for their talking points. And not, to me, it's not pulling out, because as an anti-imperialist, you are out. You're the out. But if you invest in resources, you got all these private. They supposed to have all these intelligence officers there that's still helping. And the Biden administration was open about this. They're like, yeah, we still have contract. I'm like, that means you're not pulling out then, right? What's your thoughts, Max?
Well, again, I mean, you put it together really well. And shout out to Vaquero Supreme, who said that Management of Savagery is required reading. That's my last book. And you'll find a lot of critical background on U.S. covert operations in Afghanistan and how it led directly to 9/11, the creation of Al-Qaeda, the unlocking of the box of the jihadist monster. That all took place through the largest CIA operation in history prior to its operation in Syria. It was called Operation Cyclone. And it led to the destabilization of Afghanistan in the 1990s, where basically the CIA had backed various warlords, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, and the head of who became the head of the Northern League, Ahmed Massoud. These figures all battled for control of Kabul after the Soviet Red Army withdrew, and the U.S. refused to sign a treaty with the Soviets to stabilize Afghanistan. They basically wanted it to be destroyed. The heroin trade was fueling the whole thing. These figures, they had been armed to the teeth by the CIA, and they were basically international drug dealers. It helped destabilize other regions, including Russia in the 1990s. They had a huge AIDS problem in Russia because of heroin flowing in and people sharing needles. That was a direct result. And so Kabul is destroyed. I actually interviewed one of the last officials to stay on in government and put on a suit and go to work in Kabul while the whole city was being destroyed. And then the Taliban comes in, and what do? They actually restore order. They actually stop the fighting. People welcome them because they'd been ruled by drug dealers before. They start actually crushing the opium trade, but they don't have any money and the whole place is destroyed. So who do they turn to for money? Osama bin Laden. He's there. He's the son of Saudi wealth. He needs a place to go with Al-Qaeda because he had been kicked out of Sudan by US under US pressure. So they give him a little, they basically were go into those caves in Kandahar, which you actually helped build with your family's earth moving equipment, because he comes from a family that is in construction in Saudi Arabia. The CIA had paid for a lot of these tunnels. They let Osama bin Laden be there. So because bin Laden was there, they were tolerating him. The Taliban did not like him, was not into transnational terrorism. The U.S. attacks Afghanistan, uses it as a pretext to occupy that area because of its geopolitical significance in 2001, rare earth minerals, the proximity to China, it's at the center of the new Silk Road, the proximity to Russia. The U.S. thought that it would be this geopolitical bulwark in Central Asia. There are oil pipelines. Actually, in the 1990s, the U.S. had paid the Taliban to run protection on a Unocal pipeline that was meant to challenge Russia's control for natural gas in the Caspian Sea. So you can understand why the U.S. wanted to be there. It had nothing to do with fighting terrorism. It was completely ill-conceived. 20 years later, the United States is still there and it has to pull out. And the same dynamic is taking place where the Taliban is coming back in, and there's nothing the U.S. can do about it. And so what the U.S. aims to do now, we have an article at the Gray Zone called "Biden Isn't Ending the Afghanistan War, He's Privatizing It." It's by Jeremy Kuzmarov.
I'm going to see if I can find it real quick.
Yeah. And so basically what Jeremy wrote was he wrote about DynCorp International, which you mentioned before. It's one of these contractors that is a mercenary firm that will be used in the place of U.S. troops away from the media radar. They received $7 billion in government contracts in 2019 alone to train the Afghan army and to manage all the U.S. military bases. And they get like most State Department contracts. They made tons of money off the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And actually in DC, their employees are like living it up and helping contribute to gentrification here and pushing the historically Black population out of DC. So there's another story there to that. But what Jeremy points to as a guide, and you brought this up, I think it was really perceptive for understanding what's going to happen in Afghanistan, is Laos between 1959 and 1975, when the U.S. ran a secret war there through the CIA, you know, Air America. And how did they fund that secret war? Through heroin exports. And they had civilian contractors, they had ground bases, radar stations, and then they had their own private army among the Hmong people who now mostly live in, a lot of them had to be taken out and given sanctuary in Minnesota because after the secret war failed, they weren't too popular. Much like a lot of the Afghan translators who you will meet driving Lyfts and Ubers in Washington, D.C. They're not too popular after helping the U.S. Army. So this is, there's going to be a Phoenix program. I'm sure you're familiar with the Phoenix program, where basically the CIA kept tallies on how many Viet Cong commanders and it assassinated. It was basically a killing program. And it's going to be ugly, and it will continue without whether we like it or not.
Yeah, that's an amazing breakdown, Max. That's why you here break down for us. I want to talk about this one thing for sure, because like I said, we can talk all day on these issues, but I want to bring up John Cusack for dang because we talk about propaganda and how people can follow propaganda, and obviously to me the issue of Julian Assange is the issue that exposed shit lived the most. Like that's the one where it's like the big hypocrisy where you see where they pretend, oh, we care about freedom of the press, especially under the Trump years. And now, like whenever like Democrats do something that opposes the First Amendment or freedom of the press, they all for that. They all for the censoring of Trump. They don't have no principles. They just go around following their partisan hackery. And now what John, let me pull up the tweet so you guys know what we're talking about. I want to get Max thoughts on this, because the fact that we even have someone like John Cusack in a position on the high level of the Bernie Sanders campaign showed exactly why we was fucked. Like shit libs infiltrated the Bernie Sanders campaign. Now we know that for damn sure. Like we had people like Pramila Jayapal, Chuck Rosa that was pretty much telling Bernie Sanders go light on Biden, go easy on Biden. They're the one who pressured him to drop out. Like so, the Bernie campaign, and a smart move by the liberals, they infested that. They infiltrated and infested that, and that's exactly what John Cusack was. Before I pull a tweet out, we about to say anything, Max?
Oh, pull the tweet up.
Yeah, there we go. I'm gonna have it here. I'm definitely interested in your thoughts, because this is just, there's so much levels of shit liberty here. I can't even get started. Sad. Truth is, Julian sided with Trump. So for one, what does this have to do with anything? So what they were saying? They were saying that if you do not agree with me, like even if this, like this is not true for one, but even if this was true, let me explain this way. Even if this was true, that does not mean he should be prosecuted and his First Amendment rights should be stolen away. So what they were saying is, if you don't agree with me politically, I don't believe you should have the same rights as us. So go ahead, Max.
Yeah, and it's what we've been talking about this whole conversation, where people either, you know, they just abandon any principle to fly the red or blue flag. And that's what John Cusack has done. He comes from a very particular context in American society that kind of passes for royalty. We don't have a royal family here. We have Hollywood celebrities.
Yes.
And if you really want to be royalty in Hollywood, especially if you're kind of like a faded former child actor, like the best way to do it is to be a big time Democrat.
They all learn that lesson. Once their Hollywood career dies down, they become a loyal Democrat, and that's another way in. Why am I blanking on her name? Alyssa Milano. That's her,
Milano.
Right?
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. I don't know why I was blanking on her name for a second, but that's like the best example. But there's many of them. So don't get me wrong, there's a lot of them. But probably John Cusack and Alyssa Milano, they're probably like the top of that, right?
I don't know if they're the top, but I could.
Who's top of your power rankings on that? I don't know.
Give me
here's Lee Camp. Let's see why you think about that. This was Lee Camp said. This is one of the dumbest, most ignorant and immoral takes I've seen recently. Pathetic. The man who made the movie War Inc. spouting garbage propaganda to indict one of the few people who risked their lives to expose the war crimes of the American empire.
Yeah, and I just said that it was like a symptom of like the moral rot, or you could even call it the brain damage of Russiagate and resistance politics.
Oh my God, that did so much damage. So much damage.
On John Cusack, I knew him or had some like social time with him because he was always around. He wanted to be around leftist circles after Occupy, when it became cool to kind of be a radical leftist. There was like this period where there was like a radical chic, and like some of the people around Occupy, like Molly Crabapple, had become stars, and they had these conferences of the International Socialist Organization, or I call it like the International Suburban Organization, or International PSYOP. It's like a fake socialist organization that's kind of like doing the Gloria Steinem like cultural Congress for Cultural Freedom thing. We exposed them at the Gray Zone. They were pushing regime change in Syria, pushing regime change in Venezuela, pushing regime change in even Cuba. They pushed regime change in a big way, but all while claiming they're socialist. And they would have these glitzy gatherings in Chicago at a luxury hotel by the airport, and they'd bring out stars. Amy Goodman was there every year, and John Cusack was one of their keynote speakers. And I was like, I didn't know John Cusack was a socialist. What is this? They brought me one year, and I was like, this is the strangest socialist convention I've ever been to, because there's a lot of money around here. There were like big foundation millionaires and billionaires.
They love to co-opt our language.
Totally. And it was because socialism was becoming cool, but also it was a counterinsurgency operation. And so I got to like meet Cusack a few times, and you know, he's a nice enough guy. I don't want to really denigrate him personally, but I just could never really break through, and there didn't seem to be like any substance when he was talking about politics. Whereas if you talk to someone like Roger Waters, who's lived through the 60s, and there's just deep, rich layers of political substance and history there. And Cusack got drawn into this idiotic culture during Russiagate, thinking he was doing the right thing, writing these barely coherent tweets about how Trump was being controlled by Putin. And then he was starting to attack some of the people that I had hung out with him, some of the leftist kind of popular figures that he reached out to, and he was attacking them and saying like, how can you not go along with this? So I remember he went to meet Snowden. I think it was in Hong Kong or somewhere. Maybe it was in Moscow. He went to meet Snowden with the Indian author whose name I forget. And there's a picture of him like kind of posing on the bed, like deep, like staring into Snowden's eyes, like looking like he's deeply interested in what this courageous whistleblower has to say. And I just kept thinking about that photo when I saw the Julian Assange tweet, and thinking, man, like what a literal poser. And I hope he got something for this, because it shows you what our culture does to people.
Yeah, man, I see so many of these Hollywood celebrity frauds. Like, I can't stand celebrity pop culture at all, because they always go with pretty much the Democratic Party talking point. And that's a big problem with the Black community. You get a lot of these Black athletes who just sell out to the Democratic Party because that's the easy thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But this is what my
Kyrie Irving is kind of an interesting character, by the way. I was thinking about him. He says some interesting things sometimes where I think he's
what he say?
I just hear him. He went off on the racism in Boston, which is a real thing, and a lot of other players are afraid to talk about it. He talked about
I gotta look more into that.
He talked about U.S. and he's actually talked about U.S. imperialism, but it's clear he's like on the verge of being radical, but he hasn't.
Yeah, we need a few more people like that.
He doesn't have people around him to kind of ground him in the literature and the history. And I see there's so many athletes that because they're just being completely exploited and they know it. And the system they're being brought in, especially in the NFL, is just so racist and exploitative, but there's no one to reach out to them. And, there's a show, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a socialist sports show called Red Spin Sports. My friends, Nathaniel Wallace and Michael Sampson, they live stream all the time. You should have them on. But one of the things, they're like catchers in the rye for people in sports. Like, they reach out to them and try to provide them with a good political education, because they're in the trenches with them. They come out of it. Nathaniel was actually a star athlete, offensive lineman for the University of South Carolina. He may have gone pro, but he suffered major back injuries, as so many offensive linemen do. They either get their knees or back destroyed.
Yeah.
And he found as a mentor during this period of searching when he couldn't play sports anymore, Cleveland Sellers from SNCC, who is the father of one of the biggest AIPAC sellouts of our time, Bakari Sellers.
Oh man, yeah.
And he says every time I try to bring up Bakari with Cleveland, it's like he doesn't ever want to say anything negative about his son, but they clearly went different ways. But he had this awakening, and now he has, I think, one of the most important podcasts, because
I hope we see more.
Sports is such a good way in, especially pro sports, but college sports, I mean, you're basically a slave playing for free for the NCAA, multi-billion-dollar institution. It's such a strong, there's so much potential there for radicalizing people. And I would just say, before him, there was Dave Zirin. I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Dave Zirin, or maybe you're not.
I need to become more familiar.
Okay. Well, I mean, Dave was in the ISO, and I like him on a personal level, but I see him promoting a boycott of the Olympics in China, pushing like just straight up State Department leftism, and it's really depressing. So there are very
I see there's like a clear line that they're not allowed to cross, and I see some, like, especially black athletes that do good things, but for example, like LeBron James, he's like allowed to talk in the context of like identity politics. Like he's allowed to call out racism in some instance. And what he's not allowed to do, he's not allowed to do a class analysis. He's not allowed to talk about ending the war, for example. Like there's a clear line of what he's not supposed to do. Like he's not gonna support a worker strike. He did kill the NBA strike with Barack Obama. He'd take his side. So there's like, they do good on some issues, but they know where their Overton window is. They know exactly what they can and can't talk about.
He did cross the line once where he said that he wasn't going to refuse to play in China and boycott China over Hong Kong.
I remember hearing about that, but I didn't follow it too closely.
Yeah, we have a piece by Ajit Singh at the Gray Zone about it. And he was demonized in Hong Kong in a very racist way. And, you had NBA owners saying we support Hong Kong. But my overall point is, I think like one of the most fertile grounds for radical politics in U.S. popular culture is not with celebrities. It's not it's not with recording artists. They're all so easily bought off. It's with college and pro athletes, and there needs to be some outreach to them. And you can see what the NBA is doing. Like they're putting the woke politics on steroids. They're like, you can wear one of 32 slogans on the back of your jersey, including group economics and education reform. And I
just don't have any patience for people who push capitalism as a solution to the black community. That will a lot of them do. Like even when they talk about black issues, the implication that black capitalism is the solution to that. There's one more thing I definitely want to talk about, because we can I had to bring you back on because we can talk about these issues.
No, this is therapeutic for me, because a lot of other interviewers, they just want to talk about like the granular issues.
I just like talking to people, and your work is important, but we can talk within the context of your work. I can talk about this stuff all day.
Where are you based, by the way, Nick?
I'm in Kansas City. For Hampton Leftists, we all over the country though. We got people on the West Coast, East Coast. So yeah, I'm just some Midwestern guy who learned a lot and read a lot, and I think I can talk circles around these imperialists, like these people that go over Harvard, and they pretty much, like, when you go to Harvard, you're just learning the propaganda. You're just mastering. That's the way it is. Alan Dershowitz. Do you guys think Alan Dershowitz is smart? I went this is why I generally believe. But anyway, okay. I want to ask you about Haiti. I've been doing a lot more reading and looking into the situation in Haiti, because Haiti honestly doesn't get talked about a lot, but. And once again, my focus, what I want to do is focus on foreign policy, state violence, class war, things that actually affect our community. And now this is where you can expose the hypocrites in the Democratic Party. These are the same people that put Black Lives Matter in their profile pic. Meanwhile, they're silent when Biden deports more Haitians in 1 year and first 100 days than Biden does in the whole year. So the Democratic Party has a long history of anti-Haiti policies, and Joe Biden at one point, I got the video clip, we can play it, where he's like, yo, if even Haiti sinks, not a big deal. It's not a big part of U.S. interest, because they don't care about the well-being of the Haitian people, and that's been shown throughout the course of their policy. So I tell liberals all the time, you're not opposing white supremacy if you support the Democratic Party. If you're not standing in solidarity with Haitian people going against U.S. imperialism, you're not really fighting white supremacy. You're not standing for Black lives. But anyway, what's your take initially? Because obviously, Jovenel Moïse was killed, and my main thing I want to focus on is the impact of the United States, because that's our role. Like, we can only talk about what our state done. Chomsky talked about this before. I can talk about all the other different things, but we are responsible for our state. So I want you to get a little bit of context and history into this situation and how the United States was complicit with destabilizing Haiti.
Yeah, this is Haiti is, it can make your head spin if you learn all the details. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that I mentioned an investigation I did on the removal of Jean-Bertrand Aristide the second time. There were 2 coups that removed him. The second one was 2003, I think. And that was a period when I went deep into the history and the current, like, contemporary political reality of Haiti. And I couldn't believe it. It was like a cross between a horror and science fiction movie. And the U.S. was deeply involved. I mean, the U.S. was the main player. Of course, you have France and Canada. Canada, because of
for decades and decades, we've been involved in destabilizing that country, even as the early 1900s.
Definitely, and before that, France, Napoleon invading, the fear of a slave revolt. Haiti's the first democracy in the Western Hemisphere. It was throwing bodies and bodies at Napoleon's troops and defeating them. It was the most successful slave revolt, and it was setting an example for people who are in chains in the United States. So it was always a threat. And France still refuses to pay the debt. It refuses to pay its debt to Haiti. I'm not an expert on Haiti. I'm not going to pretend to be. Everyone who's watching this, we're going to have 2 experts on Haiti tomorrow on a Gray Zone podcast at 3 p.m.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's Jeb Sprague, who is...
Because I'm still learning too, because there's a lot to learn about this. Like, I was looking into how much the United States get involved in Haiti, how they're pretty much complicit when installing juvenile moist. And I'm learning this stuff, like, yo, this is insane.
Well, I'll talk about that a little. I'll try to talk about the broader details, but we're having Jeb Sprague, who is a scholar on the militarization of the Caribbean, the role of the U.S. in militarizing the Caribbean, and he did a lot of research in Haiti, and Nazaire Saint-Fort, who is a Haitian agronomist, and I think it might be his first appearance, but he knows the situation inside and out. And basically, the Clintons are a really important force in Haiti. In 1991, towards the end of the first Bush administration, Aristide was removed. Aristide was removed by Haitian military officers who had been trained by the School of the Americas, which is like the dictator training academy at Fort Benning in Georgia. So basically, the U.S. hand was there. Who was Aristide? He was a liberation theology preacher who had started a popular movement in the slums around Port-au-Prince and among the rural peasantry called La Valasse. It just means the wave, like the human wave. And he got rid of the Tonton Macoute, which was basically the deep state forces of the Duvalier dictatorship. And then they removed them pretty quickly. But something remarkable happened, which doesn't usually happen when there is a coup backed by the U.S. Bill Clinton comes in, and he has to answer to one of the constituencies that brought him into office, Black Americans, and specifically the Black Congressional Caucus, which was much more progressive then than it is now, although it was still heavily co-opted. You had people like Ron Dellums and others chain themselves to the White House, demanding that Aristide be restored. So Bill Clinton actually enacts a military operation over a lot of opposition within the military. They're like, why are we sending this communist preacher back into power in Haiti? He enacts a military operation to send Aristide back in, and he becomes president again. But it wasn't so simple. Aristide had already agreed in backroom deals to open up Haiti to multinational corporations, sweatshops, free trade agreements. The key free trade agreement was basically to allow the import of U.S. rice from Bill Clinton's home state of Arkansas. And Haiti depends heavily on rice. That's one of its kind of cash crops. So the whole rural sector of Haiti is basically, all the farmers are wiped out, and they have to import rice when they had all the rice they needed in the world. People really were starting to get mad at Aristide. And then you had this network of basically death squads led by a guy named Guy Philippe, who was like a local gangster. I actually interviewed him somehow. Like, I just picked up the phone when I was like in my rental in LA and got Guy Philippe on the phone after he had led his little gangs against Aristide and removed him. But they were doing hit and run operations across Haiti, basically terrorizing Lavalas supporters. And then the National Endowment for Democracy, which I'm sure you've talked about on the show, it's basically the regime change arm of the US government, was paying and training all of these small parties. They were taking in money from what they call the MREs in Haiti, who are basically white and very light-skinned. Many of them are Lebanese people who are wealthy by US standards, who run sweatshops. And they backed opposition to destabilize the country, refuse to participate in elections against Lavalas because they would lose every time, and just create this atmosphere of what you see in Venezuela, for example, with Guaido. And so with the combination of the death squads of Guy Philippe and the US-backed opposition, they ran Aristide out. And in the end, I should also mention that the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee was run by Jesse Helms, neo-Confederate senator from North Carolina, and he was pushing regime change hard by running sanctions on defensive weaponry to Haiti's police forces. So by the end, the Haitian police basically had batons. They didn't even have bulletproof vests. And Guy Philippe and his guys ran up in the presidential palace with not even the most sophisticated weaponry. Aristide was having to pay a mercenary firm called the Steel Foundation from San Francisco to protect him because the police had been so worn down by sanctions. And he was sent on a plane to South Africa. I'm surprised he made it out alive. René Préval comes in and he tries to enact some of Aristide's programs. He tries to raise the minimum wage, for example. And Hillary Clinton actually flew down to lobby against the raising of the minimum wage to something like 43 cents when she was Secretary of State. The Clintons had built this really close relationship with Haiti, and their foundation during the earthquake, I'm sure you remember, raised a lot of money for relief work. And then they basically built 7 houses and took all the money.
It was a scam. It was a
huge scam. It was like, and Wyclef was doing the same thing. His foundation was a huge scam. So the Clintons are like one of the main avenues for U.S. influence in Haiti. And one of the Clintons gets into the State Department and begins to cultivate right-wing U.S.-backed leadership that won't even try to do what René Préval did.
And so we learned, correct me if I'm wrong, but we learned about the corruption of the Clinton Foundation in Haiti through Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, didn't we?
Yep. And
that's another thing that connects. But
that's
go ahead,
how we
Max.
know about her lobbying. Yep. That's how we know about her lobbying against the minimum wage hike of like 5 cents, which highlights why he's in prison.
Yep, exactly.
And so they find like this guy, Sweet Mickey. He was a popular singer, Michael Martelli, and the Clintons throw all their weight behind him. They basically fixed the election through the OAS. It was completely rigged multiple times, which we learned about through WikiLeaks. And Martelli's handpicked successor, someone who comes from his fold, is Jovenel Moïse. So there's a succession of U.S.-backed leadership. And the Biden administration, while it was condemning Venezuela's election, its legislative elections, which we covered at the Gray Zone, and I saw it take place with my own eyes, they called it a fraud. It was anything but a fraud. They love to delegitimize elections. But in Haiti, Moïse was refusing to leave office and was trying to do a referendum to extend his term, because he was basically it was a one-party dictatorship. He was dismissing people from the Supreme Court who were demanding he leave office. And the Biden administration was like, it's cool. He can stay for another 2 years and then we'll see what happens, because they didn't have a plan for Haiti. And now you have a power struggle. One of the people who is a potential successor is Claude Joseph, who has been cultivated through the U.S. regime change networks, like the National Endowment for Democracy. But honestly, like the situation right now, I've been reading about it. I do not know what the hell is happening.
There's a lot of just theories, like a lot of questions, and like it's a lot of debate on what's going on, because it's like, does the U.S. Do they get something to gain out more destabilization with Moise, because Moise been rejected by his own party leaders from adding additional referendums and stuff as well. So I think the United States also benefits in causing continued destabilization in that region. But I also see it the other way around, where they don't want to see this guy see him die, because he also is a puppet. But at the same time, even the Biden administration started rebuking Moise because his authoritarian tendencies. That's how bad it was becoming. I actually see the arguments both ways, where the United States will benefit from his death, but actually, and then also there's an argument that they still want him to be installed, because that's the person who Biden and the Democratic Party wanted to win in the first place. But what you mentioned there with the corruption, with the Clinton Foundation, hey, that's one of the first things that awakened, and that when I started noticing what the United States have done to Haiti to destabilize the region. But it's go over and over again with them supporting the authoritarian tyrants in Haiti, right?
Yeah, I mean, just one last point is that all Haitians, except for those who I guess were behind the assassination, I mean, there may have been one of these MREs that I mentioned, Reginald Boulos. He's a suspect and someone who might have wanted to bump off Moise. He's such a slime bag. Like, he was involved in a pharmaceutical scandal where they sold pharmaceuticals with bleach into a slum in Port-au-Prince, and a lot of children died because his family manufactures pharmaceuticals locally. But just most Haitians really reject this, even though they despise Moise, because they see it as a violation of Haitian sovereignty. And that is the issue here. The issue here is that Haiti has, ever since it staged this inspiring, amazing slave revolt, has never enjoyed sovereignty. And who is alleged to have killed him? Mostly Colombian mercenaries, who allegedly, and they may have actually been part of his security detail. I mentioned how at the end,
it was pretending to be DEA agent. That's why people wonder, like, how did they let them in? How did they even get that mission accomplished?
They might have already been in the door, because they were seen the day before with the security detail, according to some reports.
Yeah. So there's still a lot. There's still so much information to parse on this.
But the point that I'm making is these guys came from Colombia, and they were working for a U.S. mercenary firm based in Doral, Florida. Doral is the neighborhood where the right-wing Venezuelans live in Miami, the area. That's where, like, Marco Rubio comes from. No, he's not from Doral, but this is the area where, like, the Venezuelan right-wing is based. And it was on a golf course in Doral in 2020. I think it was the 15th hole, where the mercenary operation, remember the Bay of Piglets or the Bay of Guinea Pigs, was planned against Venezuela to send mercenaries there, and they all got captured easily killed by the Venezuelan army and captured by fishermen. So all of these plots are just pouring out into the Caribbean from the United States with Colombians, and Colombia is the U.S. base in Latin America. It's what Evo Morales called the Israel of South America. And Haiti is just constantly being preyed on from the outside. I think there are openings now inside Haiti for this protest movement and revolutionary forces, because there is a power vacuum. But the U.S.
They don't even have a parliamentary, don't they? Because that was disbanded. Like, so I was about to ask you about the power vacuum and what they're going to do about that. You even have the opposition party that was like, hey, this is a bad moment. We need to make sure people stay calm. Even though the people of Haiti, not even more than Moise, because there was a large uprising against them because of his authoritarian tendencies. So now there is that power vacuum. I want to ask you about that, because their whole government is in disarray. I think they only had like 10 senators, I'm reading. So, and they're pretty much just puppets of the president. It's like there's so much corruption on top of corruption. So what do you like? I definitely got to listen to that podcast that you guys have tomorrow, because I'm really interested to see, like, what's the next step. Now you have pretty much the government that was disarrayed, and Moise who want to have a presidential power grab, and he was trying to center the government around himself. That led to this vacuum. So, what's your thoughts on that? What you see in the future on that?
Yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right?
I don't want to, play pundit. So definitely, people more expert than me are going to be on our podcast tomorrow at 3, and I'm going to put that question to them right up front. Another person you should invite on to talk about Haiti, who was just there, got out on one of the last flights before all the flights were canceled, is Danny Shaw. I interviewed him for Moderate Rebels. You can hear about he speaks fluent Creole. He's a teacher at City University of New York and has really good contacts with the revolutionary forces in Haiti. And he could answer that question much better than I could.
So make sure you gotta check out the podcast at 3 on with the Gray Zone, because once again, I'll still always gotta learn about these issues because there's so much nonsense that goes around, so much propaganda. We gotta make sure we get everything right here. That's why I appreciate having you on, Max. We can go all day on this kind of stuff. We definitely gotta have you on again for another follow, because this was amazing.
Definitely.
Is there anything else you want to plug and pro? Anything else that's going on that's relevant, Max?
Well, somebody asked 3 p.m. Eastern time, and so that's right. 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow at the Gray Zone, we'll be talking about Haiti. Someone also had asked about another podcast I mentioned. It's my friend Nathaniel Wallace's podcast, Red Spin Sports. So just to answer a few of the questions I saw in the chat. Other than that, I don't know, my live stream from this demented Zionist rally on Capitol Hill today is up at my Twitter account, so check that out. I guess we didn't get to talk about that, but
yeah, like I'm like I told you before, man. I got like an outline. I didn't even get halfway through it. We can talk about these issues so much, man. It was super fun.
No, it was a good flow, and I like it like that. Just
I'd rather just have a conversation, because especially someone as well knowledge as you either drop facts, you don't drop knowledge no matter what. So I want to end you guys with this, because obviously I'm a big fan, Michael Parenti here. And this is kind of the mindset that anti-imperialists should have. And this kind of explains the situation in Haiti as well. And anyway, I'll just play this clip. I love this clip. Also, just to give you another reason to play it. Let's watch this and we end it on here.
The third world is not.
So I'd like any excuse to play Parenti. I want to end you guys with that message. Thank you for coming on from Max. This was a blast. Thank you everyone for watching. We upload every day for all the new viewers. I appreciate you for watching as well. We had Nerdologics with Jackie, and then I have my show on Tuesday as well. We got the main panel on Thursday. We got Straight Out Politics on Wednesday, Revolutionary Jargon on Friday. Saturday, we usually have a nice, relaxing, fun stream. Actually, yesterday, Sabrina Savs had a stream talking about the Medicare for All March as organizing. So you're going to see us involved with the Medicare for All March a lot, because Sabrina is actually an organizer for that. JB Fine is actually an organizer for that, because that's what we want to promote here at Hampton Leftists, is actually getting on the street, actually mobilizing, and actually supporting mutual aid. That was Affinity, and that was Roman's promoting as well. So as we continue to grow and as we continue to get more support, these are the kind of things that we will continue to promote and grow on. So thank you guys for watching. This is Nick, Social Cinema. Once again, thank you for coming on, Max. Thank you guys for watching. Peace out.
Thanks a lot, Nick.